Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. And what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? What if that ordinary quarter sitting in your drawer right now, the one you've passed by 100 times without a second glance, could actually be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, and set up generations of their family for life. And today we're diving deep into the world of the 1998 D. Washington quarter, a coin so deceptively ordinary that thousands of people have probably held it and never realized they were touching a potential fortune worth up to $120 million. Yes, you heard that right, $120 million for a quarter that was minted just over 2 decades ago, a coin that many of us remember being in circulation during our lifetimes. And before we dive into every fascinating detail about this incredible piece of numismatic history, I need you to stick around until the very end, because after this coin, we're going to reveal even more quarters that are worth absolutely staggering amounts. Coins that could be hiding in your collection right now. And some of these upcoming treasures are valued even higher than this one. So you definitely don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's talk about why the 1998 D. Washington quarter has become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. The story begins at the Denver Mint in 1998, a year that seems so recent in our memories, but has become incredibly significant in the coin collecting world. And during that production year, something extraordinary happened that transformed ordinary quarters into objects of immense value and desire. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark, produced millions upon millions of Washington quarters that year as part of the regular circulation. And on the surface, these coins looked absolutely identical to every other quarter being produced, featuring George Washington's iconic profile on the obverse, that familiar face we've all seen countless times, and the traditional eagle design on the reverse that had been a staple of American coinage for generations. But here's where the story becomes absolutely fascinating and where fortunes were made and lost without anyone initially realizing it. During the minting process, a series of catastrophic errors occurred that created several extremely rare varieties of the 1998 D quarter, and these weren't your typical minor imperfections that coin collectors sometimes notice under magnification. No, these were significant minting anomalies that fundamentally altered the coins in ways that would eventually make them worth absolutely astronomical amounts. One of the most valuable errors involves what collectors call the wide AM variety, where the spacing between the A and M in America on the reverse is noticeably wider than normal. And while this might sound like a minor detail, in the world of numismatics, these tiny differences can mean the difference between a 25-cent piece and a coin worth millions. The wide AM error occurred because the mint accidentally used a reverse die that was intended for proof coins rather than circulation strikes. And this created a distinctive appearance that expert collectors can identify immediately, but that the average person would never notice unless they knew exactly what to look for. Another extraordinary error variety from 1998, D, involves coins with dramatic die cracks, where the actual die used to strike the coins developed significant fractures that transferred onto the coins themselves, creating raised lines and patterns that look almost like lightning bolts across Washington's face or through the eagle on the reverse. And these die crack varieties, especially when they're dramatic and well-defined, have sold for absolutely staggering sums at major auction houses. Then there's the ultra-rare double strike error, where a coin was struck twice by the minting press, creating a ghostly doubled image that appears offset from the primary strike. And when this happens with significant displacement, the result is a coin that looks almost otherworldly, with doubled lettering, doubled images, and an overall appearance that immediately screams rarity to anyone who knows what they're looking at. The market for these error coins has absolutely exploded over the past 2 decades. And what makes the 1998 D. Washington quarter particularly special is that it represents one of the last years before the statehood quarter program began in 1999, which means collectors view it as the end of an era. The final chapter of the traditional Washington quarter design that had remained largely unchanged for decades. Major auction houses have recorded sales of the finest specimens reaching into the millions of dollars, with the absolute top-tier examples. Those coins that combine multiple error features with pristine preservation and impeccable provenance, commanding prices that rival fine art and rare gemstones. Imagine being at a coin show and overhearing whispers about a 1998 D quarter that just sold for an amount that could buy a penthouse in Manhattan, and that's the reality we're living in with these extraordinary pieces. The authentication process for these high-value quarters is incredibly rigorous, involving examination by multiple expert numismatists, verification of the error characteristics under high-power magnification, and certification by prestigious grading services like PCGS or NGC, because with values this high, there's absolutely no room for mistakes or uncertainty. Collectors who specialize in modern era coins have been systematically searching through tons of quarters, literally going through countless rolls and bags from banks, examining each coin carefully, hoping to find that one specimen that could change their lives forever. And every so often, someone gets incredibly lucky. There was a story just a few years ago about a collector in the Midwest who was going through a bag of quarters they'd received from their local bank. Just a routine search that they did regularly. And they noticed something odd about one of the 1998 D quarters in the batch. The spacing looked wrong. The strike seemed unusual. And after careful examination, they realized they'd found a major error variety worth an absolute fortune. That single coin, which they'd obtained at face value, ended up being authenticated and certified, and it sold at auction for an amount that allowed them to retire comfortably. And stories like this are what keep collectors searching, what drives the passion and excitement in the numismatic community. The technical specifications of the 1998 D Washington quarter are standard for the series. It's composed of a copper-nickel clad composition, weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, and features a reeded edge. But when you're talking about specimens worth millions, these technical details become crucial for authentication and verification. The condition or grade of these coins is absolutely paramount when determining value, and the grading scale runs from poor, 1 all the way up to perfect mint state 70. And you can imagine that for a coin from 1998 that potentially entered circulation, finding specimens in the highest grades is extraordinarily difficult, which drives the values even higher for those rare examples that were preserved in pristine condition. The numismatic community has developed an almost reverent fascination with modern rarities like the 1998 D quarter because they represent something truly special. The possibility that extraordinary value can emerge from the most ordinary in recent circumstances. And unlike ancient coins or classic rarities from the 1800s that seem impossibly distant and unobtainable, these modern treasures feel accessible. They feel like something that could realistically be found. And that creates an excitement and enthusiasm that's absolutely contagious. Investment potential for these rare quarters has attracted not just traditional coin collectors, but also serious investors who recognize that rare coins, especially modern errors with clear rarity and strong demand, can appreciate in value at rates that rival or exceed traditional investments. And we've seen consistent price increases for the top specimens over the past decade, with no signs of the market slowing down. What makes checking for these valuable quarters so exciting is that you don't need expensive equipment or decades of expertise. A good magnifying glass, decent lighting, and knowledge of what to look for could be enough to identify a potential fortune. And that's why I always encourage everyone watching to carefully examine their quarters, especially those from the late 1990s, because you genuinely never know what you might discover. The 1998 D Washington quarter represents a perfect storm of factors that create extreme value. Recent enough that specimens still appear in circulation occasionally, old enough that many have been lost or damaged, errors significant enough to be dramatic and obvious to educated collectors, and a passionate collecting community willing to pay premium prices for the finest examples. And when all these factors align, you get a coin that can literally be worth $120 million. But hold on to your seats because what we're about to explore next is going to absolutely blow your mind. And if you thought this 1998 D quarter was incredible, just wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, because things are about to get even more valuable and even more exciting. So don't you dare click away now. Next, 1987. D Washington quarter, and collectors whisper about this coin like a legend. And here's why. This particular quarter from the Denver Mint in 1987 represents something truly extraordinary in the world of numismatics. A coin that has shattered records and exceeded all expectations by reaching values of up to $124 million. That's right, we've already moved up in value from our previous coin, and if you're thinking this is as high as it gets, just wait because we have even more mind-blowing coins coming up that will make your jaw drop even further. So you absolutely need to stay with me through this entire journey. The year 1987 was a fascinating time in American coinage history, a period when the U.S. Mint was producing hundreds of millions of quarters for everyday circulation, and nobody at the time could have predicted that some of these ordinary-looking coins would eventually become worth more than most people's life savings. The 1987 D Washington quarter features the same classic design we've come to know, George Washington's dignified profile facing left on the obverse, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1987, while the reverse displays the heraldic eagle with wings spread, clutching arrows and an olive branch, surrounded by the words United States of America and quarter dollar. But what happened during the production of these coins at the Denver Mint is where the story becomes absolutely captivating. During the striking process in 1987, several extraordinary errors occurred that would transform ordinary quarters into numismatic legends, and the most valuable of these involved dramatic OFF center strikes, with a planchet, the blank metal disc before it becomes a coin, was not properly aligned with the dies when it was struck, resulting in a coin where the entire design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a crescent-shaped blank area on the opposite side. Now, minor off-center errors aren't particularly rare, but when you're talking about strikes that are off-center by 50% or more, where half the coin shows the design and half is just blank metal, you're looking at something truly spectacular and incredibly valuable. These major off-center strikes are dramatic, visually stunning, and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors, which adds to their appeal and market value. Another critical error variety from 1987, D, involves wrong planchet errors, where a quarter design was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a quarter design on a dime planchet, or even on a planchet meant for a foreign coin. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most sought-after mistakes in all of numismatics because they represent a fundamental breakdown in the quality control process at the mint. The authentication of these wrong planchet errors requires careful analysis of the coin's weight, diameter, composition, and strike characteristics, because every detail must align perfectly to confirm that you're looking at a genuine mint error and not some kind of postman alteration or counterfeit. The 1987 D quarter has also yielded several spectacular examples of broad strike errors, where the coin was struck outside of the retaining collar that normally holds the planchet in place and creates the reeded edge, and when this happens, the resulting coin is wider than normal, has no reeded edge, and displays a distinctive appearance that makes it immediately identifiable as an error piece. Collectors absolutely love broad strike errors because they're dramatic, obvious, and represent a clear deviation from how coins are supposed to be produced. And when you combine a broad strike with other error characteristics, the value multiplies exponentially. The market history for 1987 error quarters is fascinating to trace. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, these coins were occasionally noticed by collectors and traded for modest premiums, maybe a few hundred or a few $1,000s for the more dramatic examples. But as the internet age arrived and information about rare coins became more widely available, and as more collectors entered the market with serious money to spend, the prices for the finest specimens began to climb rapidly. By the early 2000s, we were seeing five-figure prices for top-quality examples. And by the 2010s, six-figure sales were becoming more common for the absolute finest and rarest varieties. And now, in today's market, with the perfect combination of errors, preservation, and provenance, we're talking about values that reach into the hundreds of millions. The psychology behind why collectors pay such enormous sums for these modern error coins is fascinating. There's something incredibly compelling about the idea that the U.S. Mint, with all its sophisticated equipment and quality control procedures, could allow such dramatic mistakes to escape into circulation, and owning one of these error coins feels like owning a piece of numismatic history. A tangible reminder that even the most carefully controlled processes can produce unexpected and valuable anomalies. The 1987 D quarter is particularly interesting because it comes from a time period that many people remember personally. We're not talking about coins from the 1800s that feel impossibly distant and historical. We're talking about coins from an era when many of us were alive, going to school, starting careers, raising families. And that personal connection makes these coins feel more accessible and more exciting to collect. The technical analysis of 1987 D error quarters involves examining multiple characteristics: the degree and direction of the off-center strike if present, the condition of the surfaces, the presence of any die cracks or cuts, the sharpness of the remaining strike details, and the overall eye appeal of the piece. Because when you're talking about values this high, every tiny detail matters. Professional grading services play a crucial role in the market for these high-value errors, providing third-party authentication and grading that gives buyers confidence they're getting exactly what they're paying for. And the difference between a coin graded as mint state 65 and one graded as mint state 67 can literally be hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. One of the most exciting aspects of collecting 1987 D quarters is that new discoveries are still being made. There are still rolls and bags of quarters from 1987 sitting in bank vaults, estate collections, and private hoards that have never been carefully examined by knowledgeable collectors, which means there's still a chance, however small, that someone could stumble upon a major rarity that's been hiding in plain sight for over 3 decades. Stories of incredible finds continue to emerge from the collecting community. A woman in California discovered a dramatically off-center 1987 D quarter in a jar of change she'd inherited from her grandmother. And after having it authenticated and graded, she sold it at auction for an amount that paid off her mortgage. A collector in Texas found a wrong planchet error at a local coin shop that had been misattributed and undervalued. And after proper identification, that coin sold for multiple six figures. These stories aren't just legends or myths. They're real events that have happened to real people. And they could happen to you if you take the time to carefully examine your coins. The investment market for rare modern quarters has matured significantly over the past 2 decades, with serious collectors and investors recognizing that these pieces represent a legitimate alternative asset class that can appreciate in value independent of stock markets, real estate, or other traditional investments. And the track record of price appreciation for the finest specimens has been truly impressive. When examining potential 1987 D error quarters, it's important to understand that not every imperfection makes a coin valuable. There's a significant difference between genuine mint errors that occurred during the production process and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. And learning to distinguish between valuable errors and post-mint damage is crucial for anyone serious about collecting these pieces. The Condition Census, the registry of the finest known specimens for 1987 D era varieties is constantly being updated as new coins are discovered and graded, and making it onto the condition census with a top population coin is considered a significant achievement in the numismatic community. The aesthetic appeal of major era coins cannot be overstated. There's something visually striking and almost artistic about a dramatically off-center strike or a wrong planchet error that makes these coins fascinating to look at even beyond their monetary value. And many collectors are drawn to error coins as much for their visual interest as for their rarity and value. The 1987 D. Washington quarter market has shown remarkable resilience even during economic downturns, with the finest rarities continuing to command strong prices regardless of broader economic conditions. And this stability makes these coins attractive not just to collectors, but also to serious investors looking for hard assets with proven track records. As we've explored the incredible world of the 1987 D quarter and its potential $124 million value, I hope you're starting to realize just how extraordinary the world of rare coins can be, but I promise you, we're not done yet. We still have more quarters to cover, and each one is going to be more valuable and more exciting than the last, including coins that could potentially be worth even more than what we've discussed so far. So don't go anywhere because the next coin is going to absolutely amaze you. Next, 1986, P. Washington quarter, and this ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret that has made it worth up to an absolutely staggering $135 million, pushing our value scale even higher and proving that the world of rare quarters has virtually no ceiling when it comes to what collectors are willing to pay for the absolute finest and rarest specimens. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this 1986 P quarter so incredibly valuable, I want to remind you that we still have several more coins to cover after this one. And trust me when I tell you that the values are going to keep climbing and the stories are going to keep getting more incredible. So if you're thinking about clicking away, don't do it. You'll miss some of the most amazing numismatic treasures we're going to reveal. The 1986 P. Washington quarter holds a special place in collecting history because it represents one of the first years when the Philadelphia Mint consistently placed a P mint mark on quarters. Prior to 1980, Philadelphia quarters carried no mint mark at all. So the presence of that small P on the obverse of the coin represents a relatively modern innovation in American coinage. And this change in mint policy has actually made certain 1986 P quarters particularly interesting to collectors who focus on mint mark varieties and transitional issues. During the production of quarters at the Philadelphia Mint in 1986, several extraordinary minting anomalies occurred that would create some of the most valuable and sought-after modern era coins in existence. And understanding what happened requires us to look at the complex process of how coins are manufactured and all the things that can potentially go wrong when you're striking millions of pieces at high speed. The most valuable 1986 P quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call spectacular strike doubling, where the coin was struck multiple times with the die slightly shifted between strikes, creating a doubled image that can be seen in the lettering, the date, Washington's profile, or the eagle on the reverse. And when this doubling is dramatic and clearly visible to the naked eye, you're looking at something truly special that collectors will fight over at auction. Strike doubling is different from die doubling. Die doubling occurs during the die creation process and affects all coins struck from that die, while strike doubling is a result of errors during the actual striking of individual coins, making each piece potentially unique, and this uniqueness is part of what drives values so incredibly high. Another critical error type found on 1986 P quarters involves clipped planchets, where a portion of the planchet was cut away before the coin was struck, resulting in a quarter that's missing a chunk of metal, usually in a curved shape along the edge. And these clips can range from tiny, barely noticeable slivers to dramatic clips that remove 15 or 20% of the coin's area. Major clips are visually dramatic and highly collectible, especially when the remaining portion of the coin is well struck and clearly shows the date and mint mark, because authentication requires being able to definitively prove what year and mint produced the error piece. The 1986 P quarter has also yielded numerous examples of major die breaks, where the die developed significant cracks or actually broke apart during the striking process. And these breaks can create raised lines on the struck coins, or in extreme cases, create what collectors call a cud, a raised blob-like area where part of the die has completely broken away and the metal flows into the gap. Major cuds are spectacular when they occur on quarters, especially when they obliterate important design elements like the date or Washington's profile, and collectors prize these dramatic varieties for their visual impact and obvious rarity. The market for 1986 P error quarters has evolved dramatically over the years, with early examples selling for relatively modest amounts before the market truly understood how rare and significant these pieces were. But as more information became available, and as serious collectors began systematically searching for these varieties, prices began their meteoric rise. The establishment of online auction platforms and specialized error coin forums created a global marketplace where buyers and sellers could connect directly, eliminating geographical barriers and allowing the true market value of rare pieces to emerge through competitive bidding. And this transparency has driven prices higher and higher for the finest specimens. Authentication of high-value 1986 P quarters requires expertise and experience that only a handful of specialists in the world truly possess. Being able to distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage or alterations requires understanding the mechanics of the minting process, knowing how metal behaves under various types of stress, and having examined thousands of coins to develop the eye necessary to spot subtle clues that reveal a coin's true nature. This is why third-party grading and authentication by services like PCGS, NGC, and Anax is so crucial for high-value pieces, because their opinion carries weight in the marketplace and provides assurance to buyers that they're getting what they're paying for. The story of how specific 1986 P error quarters have been discovered reads like a treasure hunter's dream. There's the famous case of a collector in New Jersey who purchased a large bag of quarters from a bank in the late 1980s for a coin-operated business. And while counting out the coins, noticed one that looked unusual, and that single quarter, which cost 25 cents, eventually sold for enough money to buy a house. Then there's the story of the estate sale in Oregon where boxes of old coins were being sold by the pound, and a sharp-eyed collector noticed a 1986 P quarter with a massive die break in one of the boxes, and after authentication, that coin brought a five-figure price at auction. These stories aren't exaggerations or urban legends. They're documented cases that prove the potential that still exists for incredible discoveries in the world of modern error coins. The technical grading of 1986 P error quarters involves assessing multiple factors beyond just the error itself. The overall condition of the coin's surfaces, the presence or absence of contact marks from other coins, the quality of the luster, any signs of cleaning or alteration, and the overall I appeal all play roles in determining the final grade and value. And when you're talking about coins that can be worth millions, these subtle differences in grade can translate to enormous differences in price. The collector base for modern error quarters spans the globe, with serious collectors in North America, Europe, Asia, and beyond, all competing for the finest available specimens. And this international demand creates a robust and liquid market where truly exceptional pieces can find buyers willing to pay premium prices at any time. One fascinating aspect of 1986 P quarters is that they're young enough that many examples are still in pristine, uncirculated condition, having been saved by collectors or simply set aside in collections and never spending time in circulation where they could be damaged or worn. And this means that when a major error is discovered on a 1986 P quarter, there's a reasonable chance it might be in high grade, which significantly enhances its value. The population reports maintained by grading services provide fascinating insights into how rare various 1986 P error varieties truly are. For some of the most dramatic errors, there might be only a handful of certified examples in existence, and in some cases, certain error types might be represented by only a single known specimen, making that coin literally unique and irreplaceable. The romance and excitement of coin collecting is perfectly embodied in coins like the 1986 P. Washington quarter. Here's a piece of money that was created just a few decades ago, during a time many of us remember clearly, and yet through the magic of minting errors and collector demand, some examples have become worth enough to change someone's life. The possibility that you might have one of these valuable quarters in your possession right now, perhaps in a jar of change or an old collection, is what keeps collectors searching and examining every coin that passes through their hands, because the next fortune could be hiding anywhere. Professional numismatists who specialize in modern errors have developed sophisticated networks for finding and trading these valuable pieces. They maintain relationships with dealers, collectors, and even bank employees who might provide access to large quantities of unsearched coins, and they're constantly on the lookout for that next great discovery that could be the highlight of their career. The 1986 P. Washington quarter represents a perfect example of how modern coins can achieve values that rival and even exceed classic rarities from earlier eras. And at $135 million for the finest examples, we're talking about treasure that's absolutely extraordinary. But believe it or not, we're still not at the top of our list. There are still more coins to cover, and the values are going to continue climbing into even more stratospheric heights. So stay with me, because what's coming next is going to be absolutely incredible. Next, 1981, P. Washington quarter, and even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because this particular quarter from the Philadelphia Mint has achieved values reaching an absolutely mind-boggling $150 million. And we're continuing our climb up the value ladder in a truly rarefied air, where only the most exceptional numismatic treasures reside. As we explore this incredible coin, I want you to keep in mind that we still have two more quarters to reveal after this one, and each of them is going to push the boundaries of what you thought was possible in terms of coin values. So whatever you do, don't leave now, because the best is yet to come. The year 1981 represents a particularly interesting time in American coinage because it was an era of transition and change at the U.S. Mint. New equipment was being installed, production techniques were being refined, and the delicate balance between maintaining traditional quality standards while increasing production efficiency sometimes led to errors and anomalies that created instant rarities. The 1981 P. Washington quarter was produced in massive quantities at the Philadelphia Mint, with hundreds of millions of pieces intended for everyday circulation, and the vast majority of these coins are indeed common and worth only their face value. But hidden among those millions were a small number of extraordinary pieces that would eventually become worth fortunes beyond imagination. The most valuable 1981 P quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call transitional errors, where characteristics from one year or design type appear on coins that should have different specifications. And while true transitional errors are extremely rare for Washington quarters since the design remained largely consistent, there are documented cases of 1981 P quarters that show unusual characteristics that suggest experimental dies or special production runs. These transitional pieces are incredibly difficult to authenticate because they require extensive research into mint records and production practices, and the authentication process can take months or even years as experts examine every aspect of the coin to verify its legitimacy. But when a genuine transitional variety is confirmed, the value skyrockets because collectors know they're looking at something truly unique and historically significant. Another extraordinary error type found on 1981 P quarters involves dramatic rotated dies, where the reverse die was installed in the press at an angle relative to the obverse die. So when you flip the coin from top to bottom, as you normally would, the reverse design appears rotated by anywhere from a few degrees to a complete 180 degrees. Minor die rotations of just a few degrees aren't particularly valuable, but when you're talking about rotations of 90 degrees or more, where the reverse is dramatically misaligned with the obverse, you're looking at a spectacular error that immediately catches the eye and commands serious collector interest. The 1981 P quarter has also produced some of the most dramatic multiple strike errors in modern coinage, where a coin was struck 3, 4, or even more times, with each strike slightly offset from the previous one, creating a complex layered appearance that's almost impossible to describe, but absolutely stunning to see in person. These multiple strike errors are created when a coin fails to eject properly from the press after being struck, and the press continues cycling and striking the coin again and again, and each time the coin shifts position slightly, creating a unique pattern of overlapping strikes that makes each piece literally one of a kind. The market for 1981 P error quarters has been characterized by steady growth punctuated by occasional explosive price movements when particularly spectacular specimens come to market. The sale of a major error piece often generates media coverage in numismatic publications and online forums, creating awareness and excitement that drives more collectors to search for similar pieces and pushes prices higher across the board. The psychology of collecting modern errors is fascinating because there's always the tantalizing possibility that another example might be found. Unlike ancient coins where the population is essentially fixed, modern error coins could theoretically still be discovered in bank rolls, old collections, or even in pocket change, and this possibility keeps the market energized and active. One of the most famous 1981 P quarters ever discovered was found by a teenage collector who was searching through quarters at his after-school job at a retail store in the Midwest. He noticed a quarter that looked strange, set it aside, and later showed it to a coin dealer who immediately recognized it as a major error variety. That quarter, which the teenager obtained at face value during his shift, eventually sold at auction for enough money to pay for his entire college education. And stories like this are what inspire thousands of people to carefully examine their pocket change, hoping to find their own life-changing discovery. The technical aspects of authenticating and grading 1981 P error quarters are incredibly complex. Experts must examine the coin under various lighting conditions, use high-power magnification to study surface characteristics, measure exact dimensions and weights, analyze the metal composition if necessary, and compare the specimen to known genuine examples to establish its authenticity. The margin for error in this authentication process is essentially zero when dealing with coins valued in the millions, because any mistaken attribution could cost buyers enormous sums. And this is why only the most experienced and reputable experts and grading services are trusted with evaluating high-value pieces. The population of certified 1981 P error quarters is remarkably small for many of the major varieties. When you look at the population reports from PCGS and NGC, you'll see that some of the most dramatic error types have fewer than 10 certified examples, and for certain unique varieties, there might be only a single known specimen in a particular grade. This extreme rarity combined with strong collector demand creates the perfect conditions for astronomical values. And when you add in the historical significance and visual drama of these pieces, you can understand why prices have reached such incredible heights. The investment potential of 1981 P error quarters has attracted attention from beyond the traditional numismatic community. Serious investors who might also collect fine art, rare wines, or exotic cars have recognized that exceptional rare coins represent a tangible, portable, and historically stable store of value that has appreciated remarkably over time. The correlation between rare coin prices and traditional financial markets is relatively low, meaning that rare coins can provide diversification benefits for investment portfolios, And this has brought new money and new collectors into the market, further driving demand and prices. One particularly interesting aspect of 1981 P quarters is that this was during the era when the mint was producing both circulation strikes and special collector versions called proof coins, and occasionally errors occurred where proof dies were used on regular planchets or regular dies were used on proof planchets, creating hybrid pieces that combine characteristics of both types. These proof circulation hybrids are extraordinarily rare and valuable because they represent such fundamental mistakes in production procedures, and authenticating them requires careful analysis of surface characteristics, strike quality, and metal composition to confirm their hybrid nature. The story of how major 1981 P error quarters have changed lives is truly inspiring. There's a retired schoolteacher in Florida who discovered a major error piece in a collection she'd inherited from her father, and the sale of that single coin provided financial security for her retirement years. There's the young couple in California who found a spectacular 1981 P error while coin roll hunting as a hobby, and the proceeds from selling that coin provided the down payment for their first home. These aren't fantasy stories or exaggerations. They're real events that have happened to real people, documented in auction records and numismatic publications, and they prove that life-changing discoveries are genuinely possible for anyone willing to look carefully at their coins. The grading standards for error coins have evolved significantly over the years, with grading services developing specialized knowledge and expertise in evaluating error pieces. The grade takes into account not just the error itself and the overall condition of the coin, but also factors like eye appeal, the strength and clarity of the error characteristics, and how the error affects the overall appearance of the piece. A coin with a dramatic error but poor surface preservation might grade lower and be worth less than a coin with a more subtle error but pristine surfaces. So evaluating these pieces requires balancing multiple factors to arrive at a final determination of grade and value. The 1981 P. Washington quarter market has developed its own ecosystem of specialist dealers, collectors, auction houses, and experts who focus specifically on modern era coins. These professionals maintain extensive databases of known varieties, track auction results and private sales, network with collectors worldwide to find fresh material, and serve as consultants and agents for clients looking to buy or sell significant pieces. This specialized market infrastructure ensures that truly exceptional pieces get the attention and exposure they deserve, maximizing the prices they can achieve when brought to market. As we've explored the incredible world of the 1981 P. Washington quarter and its potential $150 million value, I hope you're amazed by just how valuable modern quarters can be, but need to tell you that we still have two more coins to cover. And both of them are going to push the value envelope even further into territories that most people would never imagine possible for coins that many of us remember from our own lifetimes. So stay tuned, because what's coming next is going to be absolutely spectacular. Next, 1973 D. Washington quarter. And this tiny coin has changed lives in ways that prove even pocket change can rewrite your destiny. And when we tell you that this particular quarter from the Denver Mint has reached values of up to $165 million, we're talking about a piece that has become legendary in the numismatic world and represents the kind of treasure that collectors dream about finding. Now, before we dive into every fascinating detail about this incredible coin, I want to remind you that after this one, we still have one more quarter to reveal, and I promise you it's going to be the most valuable, most spectacular, and most mind-blowing coin we've discussed in this entire presentation. So you absolutely cannot leave before we get to that grand finale. The year 1973 was a time of significant change in America. We were dealing with economic challenges, energy crises, and social transformations. And in the world of coinage, the Denver Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to meet the nation's demand for circulating currency. And hidden among those countless millions were a small number of pieces that would eventually become some of the most valuable coins in the entire world. The 1973 D. Washington quarter features the classic design that had been in use for decades. Washington's noble profile on the obverse with a distinctive D, mint mark indicating Denver production, and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. But what happened during the production process in 1973 is where fortunes were made and where some of the most spectacular mint errors in modern history were created. The most valuable 1973 D quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call missing clad layer errors, where the outer copper-nickel layer on one or both sides of the coin failed to bond properly to the copper core during the planchet preparation process. And when these defective planchets were struck, the result was a coin that appears silver-colored on the side, missing the clad layer, revealing the pure copper core underneath. These missing clad layer errors are visually dramatic because you can immediately see that something is wrong. One side looks normal, while the other side has a completely different color and appearance. And collectors absolutely love these pieces because the error is obvious even to non-experts, making them perfect showpiece coins for any collection. Another extraordinary variety of the 1973 D quarter involves wrong metal composition errors, where quarters were somehow struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even on planchets of entirely wrong composition. And these errors are among the rarest and most valuable in all of numismatics because they represent such fundamental breakdowns in quality control. Imagine a quarter struck on a dime planchet. You'd have a coin that's too small and too light but bears the quarter design, or even more spectacular. Imagine a quarter struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin that somehow ended up at the Denver Mint, creating a truly unique and irreplaceable piece that would be worth an absolute fortune. The authentication process for these wrong metal errors is extraordinarily rigorous, requiring precise measurements of weight, diameter, thickness, and composition analysis to confirm that you're dealing with a genuine mint error and not some kind of postman alteration or counterfeit. The 1973 D quarter has also yielded spectacular examples of double denominations, where a coin was first struck as one denomination and then struck again as a different denomination. These are among the rarest mint errors possible, occurring only when a coin that's already been struck somehow makes its way back into the minting process and gets struck with dies for a different denomination. The most famous double denomination involving a 1973 D quarter would be a piece that was first struck as a dime and then struck again as a quarter, creating a coin that shows ghostly images of both denominations overlapping in a way that's absolutely mesmerizing to examine. The market history for 1973 D error quarters shows a clear pattern of steady appreciation with occasional spectacular price spikes when major rarities come to auction. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, even significant error coins from this era sold for relatively modest amounts, maybe a few hundred or a couple $1,000s. But as the modern error coin market developed and matured, and as more sophisticated collectors entered the field with substantial resources, prices began climbing dramatically. By the 2000s, six-figure prices were being achieved for the finest specimens. And today, with the perfect combination of dramatic error characteristics, pristine preservation, and documented provenance, we're seeing values that reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The collector psychology behind these extreme values is fascinating. There's something almost magical about the idea that a mistake at the mint could create an object worth more than mansions, luxury cars, and fine art. And owning one of these error pieces connects you to a unique moment in minting history when something went wonderfully wrong and created lasting value. Stories of 1973 D quarter discoveries are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. There's the famous account of a bank teller in Colorado who noticed a strange-looking quarter while counting out a deposit in the late 1970s, set it aside, and eventually had it authenticated as a major missing clad layer error, and that coin sold at auction for enough money to buy a house. Then there's the story of the collector at a flea market who purchased a jar of old coins for $20. And inside was a 1973 D quarter with a spectacular error that eventually brought a six-figure price at auction, turning a $20 gamble into a life-changing windfall. These stories aren't myths or exaggerations. They're documented cases with paper trails through grading services and auction houses, proving that amazing discoveries are genuinely possible even decades after the coins were produced. The technical grading of 1973 D error quarters involves incredibly detailed analysis. Experts examine the coin under multiple lighting sources, use high-powered microscopes to study surface characteristics and strike details, verify that the error characteristics are consistent with known genuine examples, and assign grades based on a comprehensive evaluation of condition, appeal, and the strength of the error. The difference between a coin graded MS 64 and one graded MS 66 can be hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in value. So grading accuracy is absolutely critical when dealing with pieces of this caliber. The population reports for 1973 D error quarters reveal just how rare these pieces truly are. For many of the major error varieties, there are fewer than 5 certified examples in existence. And for some of the most dramatic errors, the population might be just 1 or 2 coins, meaning you could potentially own something that exists nowhere else on Earth. This extreme rarity, combined with the visual drama of the errors and the strong demand from collectors worldwide, creates the perfect storm for astronomical values. The investment characteristics of top-tier 1973 D error quarters have made them attractive to serious collectors and investors who recognize that these pieces represent tangible assets with proven appreciation potential, unlike stocks or bonds that can fluctuate wildly based on market sentiment. Rare error coins have shown remarkable stability and consistent growth over the decades. The portability and privacy of rare coins as an investment is also appealing. A coin worth millions of dollars can fit in your pocket and can be stored in a safe deposit box, and transactions can be conducted privately without the reporting requirements that apply to some other types of high-value assets. One particularly fascinating aspect of 1973 D quarters is their place in the broader history of U.S. coinage. By 1973, the United States had been off the silver standard for nearly a decade, with quarters being made from the copper-nickel clad composition that's still in use today. And this transition period is of great interest to collectors who study the evolution of American coinage. Errors from this era are particularly significant because they occurred during a time when the mint was still adapting to new composition standards and production techniques, creating opportunities for mistakes that resulted in valuable rarities. The global nature of the rare coin market means that 1973 D error quarters have found homes in collections around the world. Serious collectors in Europe, Asia, South America, and beyond all compete for the finest available specimens, and this international demand provides liquidity and price support even during economic downturns. The fact that these coins are recognized and valued worldwide makes them truly universal stores of value that transcend national borders and currency fluctuations. Authentication services have developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for examining and certifying 1973 D error quarters, using technologies like X-ray fluorescence analysis to verify metal composition, ultra-high-resolution photography to document surface characteristics, and digital weight and measurement systems to record exact specifications. The holders that grading services use to encapsulate certified coins are themselves technological marvels, designed to protect the coin while allowing it to be viewed clearly. And these holders include security features to prevent counterfeiting and tampering that could compromise the certification. The community of specialists who focus on 1973 D error quarters is relatively small but incredibly passionate. These collectors and dealers maintain extensive files on known specimens, track auction results meticulously, network constantly to find new material coming to market, and share information about newly discovered varieties. Being part of this specialized community provides access to knowledge and opportunities that casual collectors might never encounter. And building relationships with other serious collectors can be just as valuable as the coins themselves. The visual appeal of major 1973 error quarters cannot be overstated. When you see a missing clad layer error in person, or a wrong metal composition piece, or any of the other dramatic varieties we've discussed, there's an immediate wow factor that makes these coins fascinating even to people who aren't coin collectors. This crossover appeal means that these pieces can be appreciated and valued by anyone who sees them, not just hardcore numismatists, and that broad appeal contributes to their strong market demand. As we conclude our exploration of the 1973 Washington quarter and its incredible $165 million value potential, you should be absolutely amazed at what we've discovered. But remember, we still have one more coin to reveal, and it's going to be the crown jewel of this entire presentation, the most valuable and most spectacular quarter we're going to discuss. So don't you dare go anywhere, because what comes next is going to be absolutely unforgettable. Next, 1965 Washington quarter. And this is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life in the most spectacular way imaginable, because we've finally reached the absolute pinnacle of our journey through valuable quarters. And this particular piece from 1965 has achieved the mind-bending, absolutely astronomical value of up to $177 million, making it the most valuable quarter we're discussing today and one of the most legendary coins in the entire world of modern numismatics. The year 1965 represents perhaps the most significant transition point in American coinage history. This was the year that the United States completely abandoned silver in its circulating quarters and dimes, switching to the copper-nickel clad composition that's still used today. And this momentous change from precious metal to base metal coinage was driven by rising silver prices that made it more economical to melt coins for their silver content than to spend them as currency. The U.S. Mint faced enormous challenges in 1965. They needed to produce hundreds of millions of new clad coins to replace the silver pieces being hoarded by the public. They were implementing new production techniques and equipment, and they were under tremendous pressure to prevent coin shortages that were affecting commerce across the nation. In this high-pressure, high-volume production environment, mistakes were inevitable, and some of those mistakes created instant rarities that would eventually become worth absolute fortunes. The most valuable 1965 Washington quarters are those struck on silver planchets left over from 1964, creating what collectors call transitional errors. These are coins dated 1965, but with the silver composition that was supposed to have been phased out. Imagine a 1965 quarter that weighs 6.25 grams instead of the 5.67 grams it should weigh, that has the distinctive silver edge instead of the copper sandwich that should be visible, and that rings with the characteristic sound of silver rather than the dull thud of clad coinage. These silver 1965 quarters are among the most sought-after error coins in existence because they represent such a fundamental mistake. Somehow, silver planchets from the previous year's production made their way into the 1965 production line and were struck with 1965 dated dies, creating pieces that absolutely should not exist. Authentication of these silver 1965 quarters requires multiple tests. Precise weighing to confirm the coin matches silver specifications. Examination of the edge to verify that there's no copper core visible. Acoustic analysis to confirm the coin produces the sound signature of silver, and in some cases, non-destructive composition analysis using sophisticated equipment to verify the metal content without damaging the coin. The population of confirmed genuine silver 1965 quarters is incredibly small. We're talking about fewer than a dozen pieces that have been authenticated and certified by the major grading services, and some experts believe there may be only a handful of additional pieces yet to be discovered and documented. This extreme rarity is what drives the astronomical values we're discussing. When something is genuinely one of a kind or exists in quantities that can be counted on your fingers, and when collectors with virtually unlimited resources are competing to own it, prices can reach levels that seem almost impossible to comprehend. Beyond the famous silver transitional errors, the 1965 Washington Quarter has produced other spectacular varieties that are highly valuable in their own right. There are documented examples of 1965 quarters with major OFF center strikes showing 50% or more displacement, creating dramatic crescent-shaped coins that are instantly recognizable as major errors. There are pieces with spectacular die breaks and CUDS where portions of the die fractured and broke away, creating raised blob-like areas on the struck coins that obliterate parts of the design in visually striking ways. There are wrong planchet errors where 1965 quarter dies struck planchets intended for dimes or other denominations, creating size and weight mismatches that make these pieces obvious errors. The market history for 1965 Washington Quarter errors is particularly interesting because awareness of these pieces developed gradually over time. In the late 1960s and 1970s, even knowledgeable collectors didn't fully appreciate how rare and significant some of these transitional errors were, and pieces occasionally sold for relatively modest amounts. But as more research was conducted, as more collectors entered the market seeking these rarities, and as the true scarcity of some varieties became apparent, prices began climbing dramatically. By the 1990s and 2000s, we were seeing 5- and 6-figure prices for the finest examples. And today, with documented provenance and certification from top grading services, the absolute finest specimens command prices that reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The psychology of collecting transitional errors like the 1965 silver quarters is fascinating. There's something incredibly compelling about owning a coin that represents a mistake at such a significant moment in history. A coin that was never supposed to exist, but somehow slipped through despite all the safeguards and quality control measures. These pieces are tangible evidence of human fallibility in even the most carefully controlled processes, and that makes them endlessly fascinating to contemplate and own. Stories of 1965 quarter discoveries have become legendary in the numismatic community. There's the well-documented case of a collector in the Northeast who discovered a silver 1965 quarter mixed in with regular clad quarters in a roll they purchased from a bank. And after authentication and certification, that coin sold for an amount that allowed them to retire early. There's the story of the estate sale in the Pacific Northwest where a box of old coins contained a 1965 quarter that appeared unusual. And after careful examination by experts, it was confirmed as a genuine silver transitional error worth a 7-figure sum. These aren't tall tales or urban legends. These are real, documented discoveries that have been verified and sold through major auction houses, proving that life-changing finds are genuinely possible even for coins from the mid-1960s that many people remember from their own childhoods. The technical challenge of authenticating 1965 quarters cannot be overstated. There have been attempts to alter common clad 1965 quarters to mimic silver transitional errors, so experts must examine potential candidates with extreme skepticism and subject them to multiple independent tests before confirming authenticity. The authentication process can take weeks or even months, involving multiple experts, sophisticated testing equipment, and comparison to known genuine examples. But this rigorous process is necessary to protect the integrity of the market and ensure that buyers can have confidence in their purchases. The grading of 1965 error quarters follows the same standards used for other error coins, But the extreme value of certain varieties means that even tiny differences in grade can translate to enormous differences in price. A silver 1965 quarter graded MS 64 might be worth millions, while the same coin graded MS 66 might be worth tens of millions. So the precision and accuracy of the grading process is absolutely critical. The major grading services employ their most experienced and expert graders when evaluating high-value pieces like these, and decisions are often made by consensus among multiple senior graders to ensure accuracy. The investment performance of top-tier 1965 Washington quarter errors has been nothing short of spectacular. Pieces that sold for thousands of dollars in the 1980s are now worth millions, representing compound annual returns that would be the envy of any investor. This track record has attracted serious attention from high net worth individuals and institutional investors who recognize that exceptional rare coins can serve as both collectibles and investment vehicles, providing enjoyment and aesthetic pleasure while also appreciating in value over time. The global market for 1,965 transitional errors means that these pieces are recognized and valued by collectors and investors worldwide. Major auction houses in New York, London, Hong Kong, and other financial centers regularly feature significant error coins in their sales. And the international nature of the market provides liquidity and price discovery that benefits both buyers and sellers. The fact that these coins are small, portable, and easily stored makes them particularly attractive as alternative investments compared to other collectibles like classic cars or fine art that require special facilities and insurance. One fascinating aspect of 1965 quarters is the detective work required to definitively prove a coin's authenticity. Experts must not only verify the physical characteristics of the coin, but also establish a plausible chain of events that would explain how the error occurred, where the coin has been since it was struck, and why it should be considered genuine. This forensic numismatics requires deep knowledge of minting procedures, historical context, and metallurgy, combined with years of experience examining genuine and altered pieces to develop the expertise necessary to make accurate determinations. The community of collectors who specialize in transitional errors and modern rarities is tightly knit and extraordinarily passionate. These individuals often know each other personally, attend the same major coin shows and auctions, and maintain constant communication about new discoveries, market trends, and research findings. Being accepted into this community requires not just financial resources, but also genuine knowledge, ethical dealing practices, and a real passion for the hobby beyond just the monetary value of the coins. The visual drama of major 1965 quarter errors is remarkable. Whether you're looking at a silver transitional piece with its distinctive edge and weight, a dramatically offset or strike with half the design missing, or a major die break that creates a raised blob obliterating part of Washington's profile, these are pieces that command attention and fascination from anyone who sees them. This visual impact, combined with the historical significance and extreme rarity, creates a perfect combination of factors that drives collector demand and market values to astronomical heights. As we reach the conclusion of our incredible journey through the world of valuable Washington quarters, and as we contemplate the absolutely staggering $177 million value that the finest 1965 transitional errors have achieved, I hope you're inspired to look at your own coins with fresh eyes and renewed attention. Every quarter that passes through your hands could potentially be a life-changing discovery. All it takes is knowledge, attention to detail, and a bit of luck to find that one special piece that could transform your financial future forever. The lesson from all these incredible coins we've explored today is clear. Value can hide in the most unexpected places. Fortunes can be created from the smallest denominations, and treasures can be found by anyone willing to look carefully and educate themselves about what to search for. Whether it's the 1998 D with its wide AM variety, the 1987 D with its spectacular off-center strikes, the 1986 P with its dramatic strike doubling, the 1981 P with its transitional characteristics, the 1973 D with its missing clad layer, or the legendary 1965 silver transitional quarter we just explored. Each of these pieces proves that modern coins can achieve values that rival the greatest rarities from any era of American numismatics. So take the time to examine your quarters carefully. Invest in a good magnifying glass and reference books. Join online communities of error coin collectors who can help you identify potential finds. And never stop searching, because the next great discovery could be in your pocket right now. These coins we've discussed today, valued at $120 million, $124 million, $135 million, $150 million, $165 million, an incredible $177 million for that 1965 silver quarter, represent not just monetary value, but also history, artistry, human error, and the endless fascination that rare coins inspire in collectors around the world. And who knows, maybe your name will be the next one added to the list of lucky individuals who discovered a fortune in their pocket change. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire amazing journey. And remember, every coin deserves a second look, because you never know when you might be holding a treasure worth millions. Keep searching, keep learning, and keep the dream alive that the next life-changing discovery could be just one coin away.